Yes, thank you very much. And I'm joined in the studio by Chris Uhlman, who is, of course, the Finance Minister and has been a foot soldier for the Prime Minister over the last several weeks and indefatigable in his defence. But 61-39 is hardly a vote of confidence in the Prime Minister by his own troops.
Well, the result is what it is, and it is a clear indication that the Prime Minister continues to enjoy the support of his party room. What is important, though, well, I disagree. I mean, you know, you'd remember that back in 2009, Tony Abbott won the leadership of the Liberal Party by one vote, and of course he led the most successful team in opposition, arguably, in the history of the Commonwealth. So this is a stronger result than back then, but you know, it does involve a clear message from the backbench that the backbench expects the government to do better. That is the Prime Minister, but also the rest of the cabinet and the rest of the ministry.
Tony Abbott said himself he now has to perform. That would indicate to the rest of Australia that the lease that he has on the Prime Minister's job is not indefinite. In fact, what he got today was a little bit more time in order to lift the government's stakes. Isn't that the message out of today?
Well, none of us are in these jobs forever, but you know, what we have decided today is to continue with the leadership team of Tony Abbott and Julie Bishop, which took us successfully to the last election. And given the hard yards, given the hard work that Tony Abbott and Julie Bishop did in the lead up to the last election, getting us from opposition into government, the party clearly decided that they had earned the opportunity to turn the situation around that we currently find ourselves in. And the best way to do so is for all of us to pull together, be the strong and united force that made us so successful in the past, and to implement our plan for a stronger, more prosperous economy.
Can you explain to us how just 16 months into government, after getting a thumping majority, you can find yourself in a position today where you are bartering for the Prime Minister's life?
Well, obviously we would rather, if we hadn't ended up in this situation. We are where we are, and the key is to do the best we can moving forward. And I believe that Tony Abbott, Julie Bishop, working closely with the cabinet and the whole party room and party organisation can turn this situation around. And the best way to turn this situation around is to focus on the job again exclusively that we were elected to do, to strengthen the economy, create more jobs, help families, and to maintain our national security.
Is the Prime Minister's tenure now time limited if he does not perform?
All of our tenure is time limited. None of us are here forever.
For the end of the year?
But I believe that the Prime Minister, Tony Abbott and Julie Bishop will take us to the next election.
You're certain of that?
Well, I believe they will.
And if they fail to perform and they lead the Liberal Party to a thumping defeat?
The key now is, well, the key now is for all of us to perform better. The key now is for all of us to do the best we can to put Australia in a stronger foundation for the future. We have been in this situation before. Back in March 2001, on a two-party preferred basis, the coalition vote was actually slightly worse than what it is now. And of course, John Howard was able to turn that situation around in less than a year.
To paraphrase a famous saying, I saw John Howard as Prime Minister, you saw John Howard as Prime Minister. Tony Abbott is no John Howard.
Well, people have written Tony Abbott off many times before, and generally when Tony Abbott faces a challenge, he comes back better and stronger, and I'm very confident that Tony Abbott will come back better and stronger for the experience that he and all of us have gone through over this past week.
Now, we've seen some policy changes, and can I run some of them by you? Can you tell us where we now stand on Australia's submarine policy? What's going to happen with that tender?
Well, I saw you interview the Prime Minister yesterday, and he explained that very clearly to you then. I mean, our policy is as it was before, and that is that we want to procure the best possible submarines at the best possible price for the best possible defence outcome and national security outcome for Australia.
Open tender?
We will be going through a proper process, and as the Prime Minister indicated to you yesterday, going through a competitive evaluation process.
So no one's heard that term before, competitive evaluation process. What does that mean? Will that be done in public? Is it done through the NSC? How does that work?
Well, I mean, obviously the government will be determining the process and how it works. I mean, at the moment, no decision has actually been made in relation to the procurement of our next generation of submarines. Those announcements will be made when the government is in a position to make those specific announcements. The important point here to note, though, this is not a procurement of office supplies. This is not a procurement
of
food or drink supplies. This
is yesterday, as a bargaining chip, the Prime Minister put this on the table. We hadn't heard about this process, by the way, before yesterday, so we're just trying to work out what it means.
Well, I don't agree with the characterisation that the Prime Minister put this on the table as a bargaining chip. But what has happened over the last few days, as you would have expected to happen in the circumstances we were in, is that the Prime Minister had conversations with all of his colleagues, and of course, in the course of those conversations, explained the attitude and the approach of the government to a whole range of issues that were important to individual members and senators.
Do you know if the Prime Minister was in contact with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, because the agreement on the Japanese subs was struck essentially between their two officers? So did he alert the Japanese to what was going on?
I mean, I'm not aware of the ins and outs of who the Prime Minister spoke to over the last few days. What I can say is that there's an error in your assertion there. No decision has been made in relation to the procurement of the next generation of submarines. There is a proper process to be gone through. We were always going to go through a proper process, and that was always going to involve a competitive evaluation of the various potential options on the table.
Co-payments, what's happening there?
Again, our policy commitment remains, and that is that we want to protect Medicare for the long term. We want to ensure that vulnerable patients, pensioners, concession card holders, children continue to have the benefit of bulk billing arrangements, but we also think that to ensure that all Australians can have timely and affordable access to quality health care that is also affordable for taxpayers, that we need to pursue policies that ensure that those of us who can afford to make a small contribution towards the cost of a medical service when we access that service, do so. Now, the specifics in how that is going to work are currently being worked through by the Minister for Health. She's consulting with the medical profession and other stakeholders, and we will have more to say about that in the near future.
Matthias Cormann, I know you have worked very hard in trying to rein in Commonwealth finances when you make the quite solid argument that they're out of control and they need to be reined in. But the message we seem to be getting now from the government is that we've done all the hard things that we're going to have to do. This year we'll be giving goodies to household budgets. How can the Australian budget afford that, given you know it's not sustainable now?
Well, that is not quite what we've been saying. So, clearly, we inherited a very challenging budget situation last year in the budget, and the Prime Minister has made that point today. We were very ambitious, and it was a very bold budget, and arguably we tried to bite off more than we could chew. And now, what the focus is going to be this year, the focus this year is going to be on growth, on jobs, on helping families, but doing it, and this involves repairing the budget, the federal budget, in a way that doesn't come at the expense of the household budget. Now, last year, we did actually do a range of things that were good for the household budget. Getting rid of the carbon tax was good for the household budget. It left your average household better off to the tune of $550 a year. Now, this year, we're very mindful of the fact that in last year's budget, with the benefit of hindsight, it appears that we were too ambitious in pursuing too many reforms in one go.
Matthias Cormann, finally, briefly, you hope to put this behind you today. You've been indefatigable in defending the Prime Minister, been just about everywhere in his defence. Are you certain that you're not going to be back in 1 month or 2 months' time doing the same thing again?
Well, we are putting this behind us. The vote today will put it behind us. All of us are now pulling together and focusing on the job that we were elected to do, and that is to put Australia on a stronger foundation for the future.
Matthias Cormann, thank you.
Always good to be here.
And Matthias Cormann, the Finance Minister, who, as I say, has actually absolutely been everywhere. And one thing that you can say for certain on a day when a lot of people feel that they've been misled is that Matthias Cormann has said exactly the same thing to people on air as he's been saying to them off air, which is I think, becoming a rarer thing in public life and something that we should welcome.